For most people, the decision to upgrade a smartphone feels harmless. It happens quietly every 2 or 3 years. A new model is announced, a trade-in offer appears, and suddenly the device in your pocket feels outdated. But financially, that small decision, repeated over decades, can quietly drain tens of thousands of dollars from your future. Not because smartphones are expensive on their own, but because the upgrade cycle has been engineered to feel normal. And once something feels normal, people rarely question it. If you ask most people how often they upgrade their phone, the answer usually sounds reasonable. Every couple of years. That sounds responsible. It sounds moderate. But when you step back and look at the numbers, that habit creates a surprisingly expensive pattern. In the United States, flagship smartphones now commonly cost around $1,000 or more. Many people finance them through monthly payments bundled into their phone plan, so the cost never feels like a $1,000 purchase. It feels like $35 a month. And psychologically, that framing changes everything. The 2-year upgrade cycle. Research suggests this cycle is extremely common. A study from Statista, which tracks consumer technology behavior, found that the average American replaces their smartphone approximately every 2.8 years. That means the typical user buys around 10 to 12 phones over a 30-year working life. And if those phones average roughly $1,000 each, that alone represents $10,000 to $12,000 spent on devices. But the real cost doesn't come from the phones themselves. The real cost comes from what that money could have become if it were invested instead. The compounding cost. Imagine two people with identical incomes. One upgrades their phone every 2 years. The other keeps their device for 4 years. At first glance, that difference sounds small, but over time, the math becomes more interesting. Let's say skipping one upgrade saves $1,000 every 4 years. If that $1,000 is invested into a broad stock market index returning roughly 7% annually, something subtle begins to happen. Over 30 years, those skipped upgrades can grow into tens of thousands of dollars. And the reason is simple. Small, recurring decisions compound, not just investments, habits. The illusion of technological necessity. Most people believe they upgrade because technology improves dramatically every year. But in reality, the improvements have become surprisingly small. A Wayne State University consumer perception study found something interesting. Participants were given smartphones from different generations and asked to evaluate performance during normal tasks like messaging, browsing, and video playback. When identifying which phone was newer, participants were correct only slightly better than random chance. In other words, for typical daily tasks, people often cannot reliably tell the difference between phone generations. Yet, every year, millions of users upgrade anyway. The psychological mechanism. This happens because the upgrade cycle isn't driven primarily by technology. It's driven by psychology. When a new device launches, marketing subtly reframes your current device. The phone that worked perfectly yesterday suddenly feels old. Nothing about the device itself changed, but your perception of it changed. Behavioral economists sometimes refer to this as perceived obsolescence, when a product feels outdated even though its functionality remains the same. And perception can be powerful enough to drive spending.
Planned obsolescence, the software layer. There is also a technical layer involved: software updates. Over time, operating systems grow heavier, new features are added, background processes increase, and older devices begin to feel slower. Some of this happens naturally as technology evolves, but sometimes the line between progress and pressure becomes blurry. In fact, one of the most famous examples involved Apple. The iPhone throttling case. In 2020, Apple agreed to a $500 million settlement related to claims that software updates intentionally slowed older iPhones. The company stated that the feature was designed to prevent unexpected shutdowns caused by aging batteries, but many users felt something different had happened. Their phones slowed down. The upgrade comparison trap. Another subtle force driving upgrades is something psychologists call relative comparison. Your phone might work perfectly, but the moment you see a friend using a newer model, your device suddenly feels older than it did a minute ago. Nothing about the phone changed, but your reference point did. Researchers at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business have studied this pattern in consumer behavior. Their work shows that people often evaluate purchases relative to what others own, rather than based on actual need. Technology amplifies this effect because upgrades are highly visible. New cameras, new designs, new colors. And when enough people upgrade around you, it creates the impression that everyone is moving forward while you are staying behind. Financially, however, the opposite is often happening. The person who delays upgrades may look behind in technology, but over time, they are quietly moving ahead in wealth. The refurbished alternative. Interestingly, there is another path many people overlook: refurbished flagship phones. These are often devices that were returned, repaired, and resold after quality inspection. Because smartphones depreciate quickly, a device that cost $1,000 new might sell refurbished 2 years later for $400 or $500. Yet the performance difference between that phone and the newest model may be barely noticeable for most tasks. In many cases, the best value in technology appears 1 or 2 generations behind the latest release. The longevity reality. Many people assume phones only last 2 or 3 years, but modern smartphones are capable of lasting significantly longer. Battery replacements, storage management, and software updates can extend usability. In practice, many devices remain perfectly functional for 5 to 7 years. The limiting factor is rarely hardware failure. It is usually perceived obsolescence. The behavioral reset. Breaking the upgrade cycle often begins with a simple question, not "what is the newest phone?" but "what does my phone actually need to do?" For most people, the answer is surprisingly simple: messages, navigation, email, video, social apps. Tasks that even several-year-old phones handle easily. Once the focus shifts from status upgrades to functional needs, spending decisions become clearer. The 4-year rule. Some financially disciplined consumers use a simple rule: keep phones at least 4 years before replacing them. This single change cuts the number of lifetime upgrades almost in half. The technology still improves, but the spending slows down dramatically. And that difference over decades compounds into meaningful savings. A quiet reality. Your phone did not become worse when the new model was announced. Your battery didn't suddenly degrade overnight. Your apps didn't suddenly stop working. What changed was the narrative around the device. And that narrative was created by companies that release a new product every year. The practical strategy. If someone wants to escape the upgrade cycle, the approach is simple: extend device life. Replace batteries when necessary. Buy refurbished models when upgrading. And most importantly, disconnect spending decisions from annual product launches. Technology will continue to improve, but financial habits should not be dictated by marketing calendars. Upgrading a phone every 2 years will not ruin anyone's finances by itself. But habits rarely exist in isolation. They exist in patterns. And when a pattern quietly transfers thousands of dollars away from investing and into consumption, the long-term impact becomes real.
Financial progress is often built on invisible decisions, the purchases you delay, the upgrades you skip, and the moments when you pause long enough to ask a simple question. Does this actually improve my life, or does it simply replace something that was already working? If you found this perspective useful, consider subscribing for more clear breakdowns of money, behavior, and long-term wealth. And if this video made you think differently about upgrades, let me know in the comments. How long do you usually keep your phone before replacing it? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.